Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. Thanks for downloading episode 100. There's loads to talk about this week, but mostly we just want to say thank you to all of you guys for listening, tuning in every week and making this possible. You're listening to the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that believes England will win the World Cup in 2019. Hi guys, welcome back. This is a big one. This is our 100th episode. Massive feat for us. Never thought we'd get this far. And obviously, huge thanks to you guys for sticking with us and making it possible. I'm joined by Dan. Dan, 100 episodes, mate.
Mate, I'm happy with that. That's kind of sneaked up on us. We've been doing it a while, but 100 episodes. Well done, mate. Well done.
Thank you. And well done to you.
Thanks. I think you do the vast lion's share of the work, but I'm happy to share the credit.
This is a very fair point. Obviously, 100th episode, we should be celebrating. We should be doing something special to celebrate this centenary. We're not, but we have got a lot to talk about. So we're going to let the content celebrate the episode for us, as we're able to do quite regularly now, which is amazing. I've got a couple of reviews to read out. The first one is from dhawk97. He gives us 5 stars and says, "Love the podcast, been a listener since the first episode," which is amazing to hear, 100 of them. "Recently I found myself agreeing with nearly everything that you say, particularly when discussing matters of selection. Dan and Andy are as baffled as we are at certain omissions from the squad, such as Sips, Armand, and for me, Atwood. I don't believe that we will win the World Cup, but I certainly appreciate their reasoning as to why we might. Logic and reason can be found here, and although it's not all rosy at HQ, it's certainly not all bad either. And this podcast reflects just that mood." So, a nice review there. Really appreciate that. Amazing that you've been there since day one.
I like it.
Yeah. So thank you very much. And our second one is from. Well, it's Willie Truscott, but he names the review Will Carrot Top Truscott, 5 stars. He says, "Best thing since sliced bread, and maybe Meghan Markle. Absolutely love listening to this, more so than the traditional England Rugby Pod. Makes my commute far less painful. Please let me join for an episode. Cheers, chaps." So 2 things here. Well, 3 things. First, thank you very much for the review, for the 5 stars. Secondly, of course, we'd love to have you on. Get in touch on email. It's probably the best bet, englandrugbypod@gmail.com, and we can set something up. We'd love to get some of our listeners on and join us one of these weeks. And thirdly, you say that you prefer listening to this than the more than the traditional England Rugby Pod. We're the first England Rugby Pod. The O2 one that calls itself the England Rugby Pod, that came along later. So there you go.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, great review. And Will Carrot Top. I'm gonna take a punt in the dark here and reckon Ginger.
Blonde?
Oh, possibly. Who knows? But mate, we'd love to have you on. We'd absolutely love to yourself and other listeners, share views, because that's what we're all about.
It is what we're about. And on that note, we've had another email. It's from a regular listener. I think we've probably read out emails from him in the past, but that doesn't matter because we enjoy hearing what you guys have to say. It's Joe Reed. Hopefully it'll encourage more of you to get in touch. Joe says, this is we obviously talked last week about co-captains. I was not particularly happy about it. I think you were less phased, but we agreed it was not the way to go. Anyway, Joe says, fairly sure that I'm one of the few England fans who actually likes this co-captain situation. Yes, only one of them can take charge on the pitch, but that'll be Hartley for the first 60, then Farrell for the last 20, and that's the way it's been for ages anyway, so there's no real problem here. I think Eddie's explained it well in terms of the media responsibility. Everything that England Rugby owes to the fans has been mentioned several times on the pod, and to leave all of that on one player's shoulders does seem a little ridiculous. Pretty sure that regardless of what people think of kickers being captain, Farrell seems set as England's future captain, and I stand by my thought that it could work. Having this extra experience alongside Hartley will probably help with the psychological side, and if you think about it, he's been making those decisions whenever Hartley goes off for a while. As for contradicting authorities, I think they're very much on the same page in terms of leading England. They have similar mentalities, which is, of course, shown in Eddie choosing them as captains in the first place. They've worked well as captain and vice for the last few years, and they share a room at Pennyhill Park, so they've got a lot of time to discuss their thoughts and get themselves into some sort of agreement where there are conflicts. I think it's exciting, and I obviously don't know for certain if it will work, but I'm certainly looking forward to seeing it. So, Joe, thanks for getting in touch again and for another pretty comprehensive explanation as to where your thoughts sit. Personally, my response to that would be if that's essentially what they've got here is a captain and a vice captain. Anyway, that you've just Joe has said in his email, Hartley will deal with things for the first 60 minutes and make all the decisions, and then Farrell for the last 20. That's what happens when you have a captain and a vice captain. It feels to me a little bit like Eddie's sitting on the fence, and I don't know. For me, co-captains is just a bit weak. Why not? Why can't it be captain and vice captain?
So I'm inclined to agree with you here, Akits. The co-captain thing doesn't sit well. But the thing about Joe, he's written in a few times now. And Joe, do you remember when he wrote in and told us he'd just got his GCSE results? The guy can articulate himself and talk with such good knowledge for, I'm guessing he's got his GCSE results because he's around 15, 16, sort of maybe coming up 17. Mate, you know your stuff at that age. Good for you, buddy. We'd love to have you on as well if you'd be keen at some point. But with regards to the co-captains, I agree. I want a definite captain. I want a definite leader.
I think you need it in a World Cup year, don't you? You need to have.
I think so.
That kind of stability of knowing who is your guy, and it's not. I mean, look, it's not going to change anything. People will say, what does it really matter? Let's see what happens in the autumn internationals. It might work. I don't think it's going to change much in terms of the way that England play. It's not going to, and the fact is, if it doesn't change anything in terms of how things used to be, why invent a new name and create? I don't know. It feels a bit soft to me. You look at New Zealand, and I know that they're not. The way to beat the best isn't to copy them; it's to find ways to kind of outplay them. But you look at New Zealand. As far as I'm aware, they've never had co-captains. They pick someone and they stick with him, and the rest of the team knows this is the guy. I don't know. Yeah, it just feels a little bit soft. I mean, and it surprises me because Eddie Jones has always been pretty outspoken when it comes to sort of telling his critics, "I don't care what you think. I'm the boss, and this is what I'm going to do." So it's not like it's a pressure thing. I don't really understand what the motivation is for having co-captains. And I suppose what Joe mentioned about the media responsibilities, that doesn't need. You don't have to be called a co-captain to play a role in that.
True. You can still be a senior player, a member of the leadership group or whatever. Yeah.
Remember the leadership group. You could, if you want to invent something, invent a group of players that you have chosen to be the spokespeople for the squad.
Equally, just like devil's advocate, are we just picking at labels here? How much does it matter? I mean, to me, I kind of want a captain defined, but if they don't care within the group, it is just a label. It's not. I mean, it's not going to define how we play or anything like that. As long as they know within the group, I guess it doesn't matter a huge amount.
Would it have mattered to the 2003 squad if Martin Johnson was playing but wasn't the captain?
But I think Jono was such a definite leader, such a guaranteed definite leader. Whereas Dylan Hartley, I'm not.
So that'd be a no.
I think it was different because it was a different time, a different scenario. I'm not bought into this co-captain thing, but it's not something that there's other things that bug me more at the moment.
Oh, 100%. But we have to pick it. We have to pick it all the little bits to build the complete picture. I mean, I put a tweet out, a little Twitter poll, and to be fair, I mean, it was close. Dylan Hartley did just get it as people wanting to see him as the solo captain, but Owen Farrell wasn't far behind. One or two had some other suggestions, most possibly not particularly viable, likes of Don Armand.
Sure.
He's got to make the squad first, and we've done that one. before. There's not much point in focusing on that now, at least not until after the autumn internationals. But I can't see him suddenly being selected as the new captain. But there you go. One person suggested Rob Shaw because he's done it before. Again, not convinced that the captain that led England to their worst ever World Cup is necessarily the guy. As good as he's since kind of gone on to become. I feel like captaincy perhaps didn't suit him as shown in 2015.
I don't think he was a bad captain. I mean, it was a bad World Cup, and there were times. I think that's moving backwards. I don't think Rob Shaw's the answer. I definitely don't think that. But that's not about Rob Shaw himself. I think that's more about.
I mean, one person did suggest that the reason Eddie Jones can't commit to a captain is because he wants to be the captain himself.
that may be true.
It may well be true. Anyway, okay. Well, look, Joe. Yeah, thanks so much for getting in touch. Divided opinion, but always good to present us with things to discuss that are going to create a little bit of debate.
He's a smart lad.
As Dan eloquently put it, it's not going to make much difference. So we shall see if that turns out to be true. I'm just glad that Dylan Hartley is back in there after what happened in South Africa. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, moving on. So the next thing I wanted to bring up. And if you listen to other rugby podcasts, I'm sure that you've heard this being discussed, but it's typically being discussed by people who are coming at it from a player perspective, from a professional rugby pundit perspective. I want to talk about it from a fan's perspective. Danny Care's red card and subsequent ban. I'm assuming you've seen it.
I have, yeah.
I understand that by the letter of the law, it's a red card, and that a red card carries a minimum ban. Although I did read that the minimum ban was 6 weeks, and he got 3, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there.
So he got 3 weeks because of his remorse, his immediate remorse, and lack of any previous conviction for that incident, I guess. Okay.
So it's a minimum ban of 3 weeks, not 6.
It's one of those, isn't it? It's sort of like, this is the minimum ban, but other circumstances.
Minimum fine, £100, but pay it early and you can pay only 50.
Exactly. It's one of those scenarios.
Fine. So essentially all he did was he stood up and someone ploughed into him with their head. But that's considered him, he's at fault. He's not the ball carrier, and therefore, and it was a weak. It wasn't even a tackle. He didn't make a tackle. He just sort of got headbutted in the chest or in the kind of shoulder region. But of course, that's shoulder to head, which is a card. I mean, he was one of the first to kind of put his hands up and say, "Yeah, sorry, shouldn't have done it." He knew that by the letter of the law, what he'd done was wrong. But I don't know. I get player welfare, and I know it's important that's looked at from every angle, but this just, I don't know, even the referee was apologetic at having to send him off.
So, yeah, there's a few sort of trains of thoughts here. Firstly, the refs can't be blamed. I think the refs have a hard time as anything. And there is some inconsistency. Actually, Wes Tonks, one of our listeners who's a Gloucester fan, mentioned this at all and said consistency of referees, because in that match, there were other incidents that were probably worse. But on the whole, the referee wasn't wrong there. By the letter of the law, that is a red card.
But that's sort of why I wanted to discuss this, because I accept that. What I don't accept is that I feel like the law, therefore, is wrong right now. They need to tweak it somehow. Because
agreed.
This was brought up by possibly Danny Care, not sure who it was, but and Ugo responded, and basically saying, surely people will start targeting players, in order to win penalties and get them sent off. And he was saying, no, they're not going to do that. They're not thinking that way. But actually, if you're the guy with the ball and you're running at an opposition player, and you're a big strong guy with a strong neck, would you not be tempted just to put your head down and go in head first?
So there's a few trains of thoughts here. Firstly, That's true. I want the law to take into account, like you say, intent. So Danny Care clearly had no intent there, doesn't want her, and fine yellow, but a red card for that just seems too much. However, here's the other thing. That's the law. Is it going to change before the World Cup? I don't know. I doubt it. So England need to train with that being the law and need to understand if we do that, rightly or wrongly, that's going to be a red card. So we need to then put a plan to make sure that doesn't happen.
I don't disagree, all right? But having watched a few of the Southern Hemisphere games during the Championship, they were not being refereed as tightly in these areas. Okay, so they were getting away with a lot more, you know, and the pundits were saying, you know, you had the pundits basically saying, yeah, that's fine, you know, rugby is an aggressive game, not saying, okay, but the letter of the law says this, and therefore, is this something that England needs to be conscious of in terms of their training, you know,
100%,
based on who
100%.
their referees are going to be during the World Cup? Because what we can't do is we can't afford to go up against South Africa and Australia and New Zealand in the World Cup, where being refereed by a referee that spends most of his time in the Southern Hemisphere, playing to these rules that we know are the letter of the law, and actually it doesn't get ref that way, and as a result, you know, we're not being as aggressive. We're not kind of committing two men to a tackle the way that we should, and preventing offloads and things. Because ultimately, this is the thing. You know, we all learn as schoolboys tackle around the legs, but you can't do that in the professional game anymore. Because if you tackle someone around the legs, simple offload.
Yeah, it is one of those where you've got to, but we 100% have to take this into account, because do we want to risk, this referee might be a bit looser than that, or he may not and get a sending off? We need to just not put ourselves in a position where we might get sent off. And it's like I said, like Wes Tonks, the guy who wrote in on Facebook, and clearly equally knows his stuff. And as a Gloucester fan, I'm sure was pretty pissed off by the whole thing. There needs to be greater consistency, especially come a World Cup where you've got refs from all over the world.
Does Eddie need to basically go and, you know, make a list of all the referees that are going to feature in the World Cup and go and sit down with each of them and say, look, here are some examples. What would you do? Because right now, the law says this is what should happen.
Yeah, I don't think, in fairness to Eddie, I've not agreed with everything he's done recently, but I don't think we can put this one on him.
No, not at all. I'm asking in terms of England preparing for the World Cup, you know, in the most efficient way possible. Is that the way to do it? To get in front of the referees, as has happened in Six Nations in the past, to clarify certain things and basically go, how are you going to ref this? Because we need to come out playing to the rules that you're going to, you know, the way that you're going to ref the game.
Yeah, I think World Rugby as a whole needs to clarify this before, because this is not by any means unique to sort of England or anything like that. And World Rugby needs to clarify. But at the moment, I think we need to train based upon that's the law.
Yep.
Rightly or wrongly, that's the law. We need to train based on that. And one thing that's pissing me off about this, actually, and really pissing me off, is people saying the game's gone soft. I went to Saracens Gloucester the other day. Trust me, the game is the hardest it's ever been. Yeah. If anything, the reason this is happening is because the game's got too hard.
Yeah.
Because people understand what the damage can be. These guys are absolute athletes, absolute machines. And that's one of the reasons. And do you know what? If that does save welfare, and if making that law a strictest thing does save a concussion, does save that, then cool, fine, do it. But then change the law, make the tackle below, like they say, below nipple line, below armpit line. Make that the law so it's consistent across the board. But because things like Danny Cipriani's red card, realistically, it ruins game, and it's not right. It's an accident. There's no intent. You're not going to stop people getting hurt on a rugby pitch. That's the nature of the game. It's a game we all love. It's a game we all know. And that's the reason people do get hurt. As long as people aren't trying to hurt people, I personally think you need to take that into consideration. Mm-hmm. At the moment, they don't seem to. Somebody runs in, even if they're not trying to hurt someone, but somebody runs in full pelt, shoulder up, they're going high. you have limited sympathy. If somebody runs into someone else's shoulder with their head, it's a bit more like, look, let's think this through a bit. But if you do that, it's so hard to know where to draw the line, because otherwise you're second guessing people's intentions. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I haven't got a solution at all, but I feel like at the moment it's very much like if the ball's in your hands, you can basically do what you want, and it's up to the opposition to not get themselves in the wrong position. But actually,
that's 100% right. Yeah, but that's how it is right now. Yeah.
But actually, from a player welfare point of view, and ensuring that everyone is safe, including the defenders, should the ball carrier not have a responsibility to kind of attack the gain line and attack the defender in a safe way as well? I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I look at these situations, particularly if you've got, a short guy with the ball and a tall guy as the tackler.
Yeah, it's
if you're a 6'8" second row against a 5'9" scrum half, you've got a long way to get down to make it a legal tackle. I don't know. Something doesn't sit well. I mean, maybe that particular setup's okay because actually your shoulder's too high up to reach the scrum half's head. But yeah, something needs to be done for me. Just to clarify things a little bit more, I'm all for player welfare. Obviously, we don't want guys getting injured, and we're seeing far too much of that. And it's not about making the game soft, but you need to keep the game competitive. And these guys who play week in, week out, they want it to be as aggressive as it can be within the confines of being safe. So I think World Rugby haven't quite got it right at the moment, because what we don't want to start seeing is 15 on 15 at the beginning and 10 on 10 at the end, because people keep getting sent off for potentially soft tackles that by the letter of the law require a red card.
Well, if the laws don't change, inevitably some team in the World Cup, some top-level team in the World Cup, will end up losing out, probably getting knocked out due to an incident like this. Like, they'll have someone sent off for unintentional weak challenge and probably end up losing the match. And that could be anyone. I'm not saying that could be any nation. And that's not really how you want a World Cup to be.
No.
You don't want a World Cup to be one based upon a rugby incident that's unfortunate and happens like that. Even if it's about changing, like they say, changing cards. So, which they do in some sports where you have a black card or something, where that player gets sinned in for 10 minutes, then they can't come back on, but you can replace them with someone else.
Yeah.
Even if it's like that, just to keep the game competitive and to keep the sport competitive. But it's a fine line. It's really tough on the referees. It's tough on World Rugby, but there needs to be some definite clarification, because if you're a metre out from the line, and as people do at the back of a ruck or more, they'll pick and dive for the line. So they're diving head first.
Yeah.
What are you saying? You can't tackle that person? Of course you can.
The other thing, of course, is that all of these red cards, they all end up getting, going in front of the citing commission after the event anyway, right? To be reviewed.
Yeah.
And some are rescinded, and the ban and everything else decided. Maybe the answer to ensure that we're not playing 10 against 10 is to say that a yellow card is the appropriate response for something like this. Because if it turns out that it is considered to have been intentional or too dangerous, they're going to find that out in the citing commission afterwards anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like, almost sort of say that in that situation, okay, if you've got to give someone a ban in order to encourage this sort of thing not to happen, at least you're not ruining the game on the day by reducing numbers. People can be replaced. And maybe, or as you say, but the black card idea with, they go off, but someone else can come on, so you're keeping the numbers up. And so at least squads have the ability, week in, week out, to put out 15 men and expect to keep 15 men on the pitch, or at least have 15 men on the pitch at the end. I don't know, maybe something like that would make more sense, rather than ruining games by saying, sorry, but I'm going to have to send you off because the letter of the law says I have to, even though I appreciate, all he really did was sort of stand in the way and he ran into your shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a hard one, because I think if you see something with pure intent, not even intent, but with, Sonny Bill Williams, massive fan, but in the Lion Tour, when he hit Watson in the head, he just went in with his shoulder. That is a red card.
Yeah, and I think that gets looked at from a different angle. So I think when they're looking at that, I think this is. I mean, World Rugby needs to clarify. That's not simply head, shoulder to head is considered a. I think maybe it's a case of it's a yellow card if it's unintentional, and it can be looked at by the Citing Commission. It's a red card if it's intentional, or I don't know. Intentional maybe is the wrong word, because are we saying that Sonny Bill Williams thought on the way in, I'm going to hit him with my shoulder in the face? Probably not.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I just feel like the answer is not the law as it is right now.
I agree. I think the key thing right now, actually, regardless of the law, is to get as much consistency as we can.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, we've been on this one for a little while, so we're going to move on. But just kind of flitting back a little bit, we were talking about DC and the red cards, how we got onto this. So before we move on from Danny Cipriani, we have had a tweet, and this is an interesting one. I don't necessarily agree with what he has to say. Well, clearly I don't agree with what he has to say, because we've spoken about this at length. But this is from a guy on Twitter, calls himself Old Timer. Experience, I guess. He says, as a Gloucester season ticket holder, I completely agree with Eddie Jones's decision on Cipriani. We watched Danny Cipriani for the whole 80 minutes, and he is a liability most of the time, and then offers the odd minute or two of brilliance. Not worth the downside. Cipriani spends most of the match hiding from the action as though he's terrified of contact. He seldom receives a scrum half pass. He hides behind the back line, very seldom tackles, makes panic, fast passes, and kicks when he's about to be tackled. Some work, and they're called brilliance. And I got this tweet, and it was a really interesting one, because one, the guy's a Gloucester season ticket holder, a Gloucester fan, and so you would think, therefore, a Cipriani fan. But more importantly, it was just a very different viewpoint. We've been, not just us, but it seems the entire rugby world outside of Eddie Jones has been banging on about how much we want to have him, Danny Cipriani involved. But not this guy. And do we think perhaps his view is similar to Eddie Jones?
So it's interesting. So I don't know. I mean, I don't personally agree with that. But having said that, this guy clearly watches Danny Cipriani in a lot more detail than I do.
Yeah, well, this is the thing.
This is what... So I have a theory, and everyone will probably be like, yeah, no shit, dickhead, we've all thought this. But I have a kind of theory with Eddie. So when he was mentioning about Ben Morgan, he mentioned that Ben Morgan was a big guy, big ball carrier, and he said that every team that's won a World Cup has had a big number 8 ball carrier.
Yeah.
I reckon Eddie's picking a team. I reckon he's looked at previous World Cup winning teams, and he's used the historic wins, and looked at what did these teams have that have made them win the World Cup. And in his head, he set up like every team has had a big number 8. Every team's had a brilliant kicking 10 or whatever it may be. And he's decided that's how you win a World Cup. You must have this. Mm-hmm. And he's not necessarily taking into account sort of who's playing best or who's the best player. He's defining who's the best players to mould a team that is it's a World Cup winning team based on historic events.
Okay, but
this is a pure theory based on me. I have nothing to back this up.
No, but hang on a second. But you're that doesn't make sense, because you're saying that he's picking a 10 who's a good kicker. I was using that as an example. I'm not saying that's 100% true. Okay, but if you compare Cipriani to Ford, how do they differ?
So how do Cipriani and Ford differ? I don't have the answer to this, because I don't know what he's looking at 10, but he's maybe thinking, so how do they differ? Cipriani's maybe a bit more sort of mercurial on the thing. Ford is more of a kicking 10. He is more of a less risk 10. Maybe that's what he's thinking. If you look at, so for argument's sake, you look at the All Blacks when they win, they tended to pick Mertens ahead of Carlos Spencer. I don't know that that's something he's looking at all. I use that as an example. It may not be, but
back your opinions.
Yeah, I'm just saying Cipriani and Ford are different players. I mean,
are they?
Ford open. Ford.
Different people.
Cipriani to me plays flatter. Cipriani to me is a more aggressive on the line player. I mean, Ford can do that in attack on the front foot as well, but I think Ford is a slightly more risk adverse 10. Mm-hmm. I think he's, he plays more to a system rather than playing a bit more sort of French style play as you see it. So maybe that's how they differ. Whether that's something Eddie's looking at, I don't know.
Yeah.
And this theory is purely based upon me thinking it. I have nothing to back this up, so I could be talking.
Back yourself. Bullshit. I mean, it's interesting because we're talking about Ford versus Cipriani, like we think Ford is the 10. But as we have said in the last episode, and on social media as well, we want to see Manu at 12, or I do anyway. I can't remember whether you agreed with me or not, and Farrell at 10. And if Eddie is thinking along those lines, like Hugo Monnier is, because as Hugo said in their last episode, he listens to all the rugby podcasts. That obviously includes ours, and he's basically repeated verbatim what we said in our last episode about Manu and Farrell. So thank you, Hugo, for sharing our theories on your podcast. We appreciate the love. But
I had a word with him.
Nice. But yeah, if it's Farrell at 10, does that change anything? I mean, I think
Farrell's our best 10. I personally believe Farrell's our best 10.
I guess the question though is he our best 12? And that can only be answered by knowing
how you play.
Well, exactly. That can only be answered by knowing what game plan you've got. And obviously, we've only ever really seen him as a 12 under Eddie Jones. That kind of 10-12 playmaker channel. But Manu hasn't been available, and he's now back. Does he see Manu as a 13, which is where he tends to play for Leicester, with his trusty pairing in the middle, or is he going to mix it up? As we would like to see, have Farrell at 10, Manu at 12, and I guess that means your boyfriend at 13. No, not Billy 12 Trees, Henry Slade.
Oh, Billy. Slady. I want those three. Personally, I want to see those three start. Slade and Manu, I don't mind who's 12, who's 13. I personally think they're both capable of playing both positions.
It's a very different back line. If depending which way around you have that, though.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So it kind of does matter. I don't. What would you prefer?
It doesn't matter.
What would you prefer to say?
I think personally,
because if you're going to have,
I think personally, I want Farrell, Manu at 12 and Slade at 13.
Because if it's the other way around, wouldn't you rather have Ford, Farrell, Manu?
No.
Interesting.
No. I'd like if it was the other way around and you're going to do that, I'd rather have Cipriani, Farrell.
Well, yeah, but we're assuming that's not an option because he's
exactly.
Not been
yeah, but with people in the squad, I'd rather have Farrell at 10 and then Manu and Slade in the centres. I'm not that fast, and I'm probably being quite naive here, but I'm not actually that bothered. Who's for 12, who's for 13. I think I'd quite like to see Manu at 12 and Slade at 13.
Right. So what we said last week and what Hugo repeated this week on his podcast.
True that.
Okay, we'll move on from that one. So my next question for you is Nigel Owens making Simon Zebo apologise.
Don't we?
Huh?
Yes, so I know because you and me had a chat about it. I think we're thinking different things. So I think that's fair enough. I don't think it's such a hard one, and I'm going to massively contradict myself here. But I think Nigel Owens fair enough. Like, don't mock him like you're scoring a try. Don't go and then mock someone when you're doing it, and then just saying apologise. I think Zebo acted brilliantly afterwards. He apologised and tweeted straight away, and I think it's done. Like, leave it at that. It didn't need to be more. Nigel Owens, to my mind, didn't make too much of a fuss about it.
Said that, is it even Nigel Owens' place to say something? Nigel Owens is a referee. He's there to referee the game and ensure that the laws of the game are applied.
But does he also have a... No, I think he also has a slight obligation to ensure the spirit of the game is as well. Yeah, I don't think he's wrong there. I know you disagree.
I 100% disagree. I think Nigel Owens is completely out of order for even believing for 1 second that he has any right to step in and have a word. I mean, who the fuck does he think he is? He's there to referee the game, not teach these professional rugby players. With something so simple as, and all he really did was he didn't even do it. He gave him a look as he ran past him, as if to say, "Done you." So what? If that was Johnny May on the outside against New Zealand, or one of our boys, we'd love it. We'd think that was amazing. Would the Scottish if it was them, and the Welsh if it was them, and the Irish if it was them. Well, it was them. But do you know what I mean? Like that for me, that's not going against the spirit of the game. It's keeping it a little bit feisty, a little bit entertaining, and that's great. It's like cricket. It's like saying let's get rid of sledging in cricket, which I know is me repeating what was said on another podcast, but it was a well-made point. We don't look at that and go, oh, it's so against the spirit of the game. Well, it can't be against the spirit of the game because it's been going on since the beginning of the game.
So I'm going to contradict myself here a bit. So I like it. I actually like it, and I not everyone does. So if there's a massive scrum and they win, and you hear Marrow whooping and everyone patting each other's back, I like that. What I don't necessarily like is if somebody makes a mistake and everybody then pats that opposition person on the head to be like, oh, unlucky. So it's a fine line. I don't think Zebo actually did anything majorly wrong, but it doesn't. He skinned
the outside. Yeah, he skinned the outside man, and he scored in the corner. And all he did was he gave him a look as if to say, "Come on, try and catch me. I've done you." And so what? That guy has the opportunity to try and come back and teach Zebo a lesson in the future. It's not for Nigel Owens to step in and say you need to go and apologise. I think that's Nigel Owens getting way too big for his boots. And I've got a lot of respect for Nigel Owens, and I do like sometimes when he pulls players aside and has a little word, because he's getting a bit fed up, or diving or faking, or whatever it might be, people giving him too much chat. But something like that, apart from anything else, it takes the opportunity for Simon Zebo to do that of his own accord, away from him, and it's not Nigel Owens' place. For me, we're gonna have to agree to disagree because
I don't mind either way, if I'm honest.
Guys, get in touch. Let us know what you think. Obviously, if you agree with Dan, don't worry about it. In fact, if you agree with Dan, the email address is englandrugbypod at the gmailplace.co.za. If you agree with me, it's englandrugbypod@gmail.com. Let us know what you think.
So this is where we're problem with this, because remember last week we were chatting about central contracts.
Yes.
And we both disagreed, and I said they should do central contracts.
Yes.
Well, actually, don't tell
me I was right again.
Well, on Facebook, there's a guy, Sam Sherratt, who responded saying the problem with central contracts is if, for example, Saracens, you had Farrell, Atoje, Vunipola brothers, all given central contracts. Suddenly you free up, 1.5 to 2 million for Saracens who've got extra in the wage gap compared to a Sale or a Newcastle. Now, Sam, here's my issue with that. If you're going to make really well thought out, knowledgeable and really good points, we're just that completely shit on my arguments. We're just two very different people, and I don't really know where we go from here, because He completely shut me down there, didn't he? It's a really good point.
He did. Sam, was it?
Yeah, Sam.
Sam, if you're listening, get in touch, because I'm actually looking for a new co-host.
yeah. Well, you are now, because he shut me down there. So Sam, fair enough, mate. That is a completely valuable point, and I hadn't taken that into account. I was just talking off a whim, but no, Sam, thanks for that, mate. And he's right.
Correct, like me. What's that? 2, 3? I've lost count.
That's why I'm just a bit more hesitant at the moment
to commit
to say anything, because Sam will come in with more knowledge than me and tell me why I'm wrong, and I'll be like, damn it, he's right again.
That may well happen. That probably will happen. We shall see. Okay, next up. Have you read about the RFU and what they've said to Eddie Jones regarding the World Cup and his future career?
Semi-final or beyond, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's been in place for a while, hasn't it?
I don't know. I just thought we hadn't talked about it on the pod.
No, we haven't. But it's so I found that quite interesting because they were talking about sort of replacement coaches, and fair enough that they've got that in mind. The fact they've come out and said that surprises me a bit. Like, why would you talk about a replacement coach? Like, you know, a year building up to a World Cup. Surely, you know, if you're doing that for due diligence, so be it. But the fact they've come out and said it has
I mean, the main thing they've done is they've just said that where in the past they had said they would only entertain coaches with international experience, they're now saying they're backtracking on that and saying actually we're prepared to entertain coaches without international experience, which brings the likes of Baxter back into play, whether or not he would, be interested. I mean, is there more to it than that? And more importantly, that's not really what I was talking about, because of course the real thing here is that they've, Eddie Jones came on initially to be with England until after the World Cup. They then extended his contract because they wanted him to kind of usher in the new era. And his contract was extended 2021, and now they're saying that actually that's provisional based on England reaching at least the semi-finals of the World Cup.
So where I think this is interesting, I think the reason they extended Eddie is in their head they had Eddie mentoring someone to take on the role, perhaps Steve Borthwick or someone.
Yeah.
Whereas now I don't think they're thinking that way.
In which case, do we think they want to get rid of him after the World Cup?
Not what, Eddie? Or,
yeah, Eddie.
At the moment, I suspect that might be going through their head. But I am massively, again, reading between the lines, but that might be going through their head because there's been a lot of controversy at the moment. There is causing, and I don't think the RFU like that at all. I think they hate that as an organisation.
Yeah.
But it's going to be it's going to be hard to get rid of him if they've given him that contract beyond, and say, for example, England get sort of semi-final. Well, let's not even say semi-final. If England got to a final, it's going to be very hard to get rid of Eddie, and rightly so. But it's also. I
mean, are we looking way too far ahead? I mean, if we go back,
yeah, I think we are.
If we go back 18 months, is there any doubt was there any doubt in anyone's mind that Eddie Jones needed to be with England for as long as humanly possible?
Well,
we're talking about
people now will say there was, but realistically there wasn't.
No, of course there wasn't. And so England have had a pretty rough run, but it's a run of five losses on the trot, and then a what's considered a weak win, a dead rubber win. Is that where we got?
There's no such thing as a dead rubber in rugby. I believe that you can't call it a dead rubber win. Like a test match, It was 5, but in theory 6 if you include the bars. But to me, that doesn't really count.
Okay, but even if we decide to count it, 6 losses and then a win. Yeah. So the last 7 games, that's what they look like.
Yeah.
Prior to that, 18 wins. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if England now, win, and it's a big ask, but win all 4 of their autumn internationals, and then they win all 5 of the Six Nations matches Grand Slam, that's 9. Have we completely then forgotten about the kind of the down period that they had? I know that's a big ask, and we've got a long way to go, and but if that was to happen, then coming into sort of March, April next year, post Six Nations, is Eddie Jones not the hero of the hour once again, and we've all forgotten about this stuff?
Yeah, of course. Everything's so reactionary at the moment, in all sports, isn't it? It's like, what have you done for me?
In the last 5 minutes.
What have you done for me recently? Yeah. So, but that's also, there is a part of it. Like, we can't be too naive and realise that is a part of sport. And you've got to say that Eddie has not made life easy on himself. I mean, as we've said before, some of the decisions we are absolutely baffled by, as a lot of people are. There may be valid reasons for them, but we don't know what they are. And personally, I can't see what they are. I tried to give a theory myself earlier, but
and you were wrong.
Well, yeah, I could well be wrong. It's just a theory, but I mean, there has to be a reason that Eddie's picking who he's picking. And
I mean, in my head, I certainly hope there's a reason. I hope there is method in what we consider to be his madness. So to kind of, I guess, go back to that point about the World Cup, about the kind of the pressure that's been put on him to perform, even though it's his team that needs to perform, is that looking way too far ahead? Because it's like, you must do this, ignoring that he might lead England to 9 on the bounce, spectacular wins potentially. In which case, it's like, well, he's proven that he can turn a side around, which he did in 2015 post World Cup, which in theory he could do again now post a little bit of a downturn. And at which point are they still saying, "You've been awesome, thanks very much. England have had however many wins to losses ratio, under your tenure, but if you still don't make the semi-finals, you're out."
To me, there was no value in it.
Yeah.
There was no value in bringing that up now. There's no, unless they are preempting a really poor autumn and sort of, they're trying to set the scenes for, because I have no idea and I'm not sure what I think here, but if we lost, say, 3 of the 4 games, does Eddie's position become untenable? I don't know. But if we lose 3 or 4, it does make it very hard. So perhaps they're...
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that we hopefully won't have to answer, but will, if necessary, in about 5 weeks' time.
Around that, yeah.
But obviously, before that happens, we're going to put those special glasses that we own on, the rose-tinted ones, and we're going to will our boys to do something special. And I don't know, I tend to have these, but I've got a little sneaking suspicion that things might start to look a little rosier for everyone else as well. But we shall see. Before we call time on this episode, the last thing I wanted to bring up was, it's just a small thing, but Christian Wade's move potentially to the NFL, because I don't think there's no team or anything confirmed. He's got a process to go through. Do we think that his lack of England involvement is one of the kind of key reasons for that move, or is it simply that
100%? Of course it is.
Is it though, or is it the dollar signs? Because at the end of the day, if he's not really been considered for England for a long time, as good as he might be in the Premiership, and there must be reasons for that. It's not just Eddie Jones that didn't select him. But if someone wants to give him £1 million a year plus in the Premiership, in the NFL, is that actually the reason?
So the reality is, he's nowhere near being part of an NFL team. Like, he still has to go through that, and there's a strong chance he won't get it, and he won't earn those dollars.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this till it was actually another. I think it was Leg Chasers actually, and they were talking because they know their NFL, they're big fans, and they were saying, firstly, he'd need to get on like a training squad, then to get there. And to earn the big dollars, you have to be on whatever the squad. And there's a massive chance he may not get that. I think there's more going on. Like they're saying, he's got an American girlfriend. It's a new opportunity. He's not been looked at for England. I personally would not pick him for England myself. I think there are better wingers out there. I think Christian Wade's a brilliant talent. But with all our wingers fit, I actually do think we have better wingers for England.
I think I agree right now. Was there a time, perhaps, when he was overlooked?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Yeah.
I think he should have had more opportunity. And I think it was Hugo Monyo. Like, we've gone to him a lot, but I'm a massive Hugo Monyo fan anyway. But he mentioned that he thinks Christian Wade was let down a bit by the system. I kind of agree with that. I think he should have been given more chance. If you're doing that much in the Premiership, I think you should be given a chance. sort of a Don Armand type argument.
Yeah,
and
go on.
He's not. Yeah, I'm just saying he hasn't been, and actually this season he hasn't had the best of seasons so far. Anyway, hey, best of luck to the guy. 100%. I'd love to see him do well in the NFL. I really would. But yes, I 100% get why he's doing it. All the best to him, but it's not. I don't think he's been robbed. I don't think he's at the moment currently being robbed of anything with regards to England rugby.
No, I 100% agree.
And I'm a big fan of Chris.
But let's at the end of the day, we've got the biggest player pool in the world, and you can only have 23 guys in a matchday squad.
Exactly.
So there are always going to be people, particularly if someone performs badly, there are always going to be people that you could say, well, he would have been better because he had a great game last week. But yeah, maybe the week before it wasn't such a good game. And maybe the guy that you did pick had a great game last week, but it just didn't happen. Do you know what I mean? So there's going to be an element of, and this is the beauty of being a fan and not doing this professionally, is that you get to say, oh, you should have picked him, and hindsight's a wonderful thing because he would have been much better, and he was rubbish. Why did you do it? But yeah, in mild defence of some of Eddie Jones's decisions, I do think there is an element of you need an idea of what you want, and you need to give people the opportunity to kind of make up for their mistakes. You can't start reacting to every performance and saying, you didn't perform as well as you might have done, I'm bringing someone else in. And then someone else doesn't quite, because you're constantly changing your squad then and you get no cohesion. There will be occasions, and maybe this is part of what's going on with Don Armand, although, that's a debate for another time. But, I think as much as it's easy to sort of listen to Sir Clive saying you always want your best players on the pitch, I don't think it's quite as straightforward as simply saying who are the best 15 or 23 players right now as of last weekend's rugby, pick them.
No, I agree with that, but I do also, there's a part of me that agrees with Clive, like you want your best players involved, and there's a lot of people who are consistently brilliant who aren't involved.
Okay, so then the flip argument to that is who is involved that simply isn't good enough.
So for people involved, I don't think there's anyone involved who's not good enough.
Is that not?
I think there's.
In theory, is that not enough?
I think there's people involved who are better. People who are not involved who are better.
Right.
For example, I think George Ford is 100% good enough to be involved in an England setup. I think Danny Cipriani at the moment is a better option. I think a Michael Rhodes, for example, great player, and I'm completely forgetting the fella's name at Newcastle, who's a great flanker as well. I think they're both good enough players to be involved. I think Don Armand is better.
Mm. I guess this is where game plans and everything else are just something we don't understand. We don't know enough about. And this is where there are elements to take into account. You can't have. If the best individual 23 players all play a certain way, but as a team you need a mixture of things, then you might argue that actually, because I need something that these individuals can't all deliver, because actually they're really good. I don't know, they're really good at set piece and they're really good at running with the ball, but they're not quite so good at competing at the breakdown, for example. So, is that not an example of a situation where you might say there might be someone who on paper is better because he's got more yards and he's scored more tries, and he's made more tackles, but you've turned over more ball, and that's what I need in the team right now. And so we as fans look at it and go, well, how can you pick him over him? Do you know what I mean? So there's going to be elements like that we're not taking into account, that we've not analysed in the same way that Eddie Jones and I'm playing devil's advocate.
For sure.
There's no point in everyone in England shitting all over Eddie Jones and his decision making. We had our moment of outrage, but the decision has been made. We've got the autumn internationals kicking off in a week's time, and that's when we're going to have the opportunity to see whether or not what he's done pays dividends. And we can only wait and see what happens. So I think now is the time to start getting back behind him, and more importantly, getting behind the team, because we can't we don't want to kind of fall out of love with the team because Eddie Jones didn't select Danny Cipriani. He didn't do it. It is what it is. This is what he has done. Now let's get behind that.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's the key. Look, we've got it's next weekend, isn't it? We're playing the Saffers, and let's get behind the team. And sometimes it's really harsh on players who are picked, who everyone's like, this person's better. It's like, that's not their fault. They're picked, and they're going to do their best for the country. Let's get behind them all, guys. We're playing, and I think 95+% of England fans are going to do that. We're playing South Africa next week. Good team. Yeah, they might be missing a few players. We're missing a lot of players as well.
Yeah.
So let's massively get behind the England boys.
And we've got a lot to prove, not just to the fans in terms of England performances in general, but also against South Africa after what happened down there in the summer. And setting the tone for moving forwards, because the biggest game in God knows how many years, 2012 was the last one, I think, against New Zealand.
Yeah.
The week after. Massive game. A year ago or 18 months ago, that was talked as being the kind of the sort of the biggest game in and certainly an awfully long time, and one that was going to really define how the World Cup was going to play out. Now things have changed slightly because of performances, but it doesn't make it any less of a big game. And England have a huge amount to prove, and that's these next 2 weeks are going to be massive. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what the boys can do. As you say, the squad has been selected. The 23 will be chosen from it. It is what it is. We can bitch and moan about it all we want. We've done a bit of that. Now it's time to say, okay, us complaining isn't going to change anything. Let's get behind the ones that are there, and let's start concentrating on what they can do, not what people who weren't selected might have been able to do. Because it's all it's all speculative. We don't know. It's all well and good saying Danny Cipriani should be in there, but for all we know, if he'd selected Danny Cipriani, he might have come on the pitch, got sent off in 5 seconds for standing up to someone in a tackle and lost us a game. So you just don't know. It's time to focus on what is going on and what we have got, and hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood and all that, see some cracking performances from the boys over the next few weeks. That's probably a pretty good place to call time on our 100th episode. Guys, thank you so much for listening. To those of you that have been with us since the beginning, we really appreciate, we appreciate all of you, but, we really appreciate the level of support that you've given us. We hope you continue to stick with us right the way through to the World Cup. That is the plan. We believe England can win. We believe they will win. But there's a long way to go until that happens. So keep tuning in. As we've said at the beginning of the episode, get in touch. Tell us what you think. Ask us questions. We want to involve you in the conversation. The best way to do that is either through social media at England Rugby Pod, or you can email us englandrugbypod@gmail.com. And of course, ratings, reviews, always appreciated. And we'll certainly read those out. Apart from that, glad you were here with us today, guys, and let's speak to you again next week.
Lovely, lovely. Speak soon. Thanks a lot, guys.